Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are joining. Thank you so much for joining and welcome to another session in Future World Conversations. I'm especially excited for today's session because this topic feels very real right now. Even for those of us who love AI, there are moments when it feels like, wait, am I keeping up? Did I miss something? Should I be learning another tool, building faster, or changing how I work? And I think that's the quiet pressure many of us are carrying around. So today's conversation is not about adding more pressure. It's about pausing for a moment and asking, how do we stay steady when everything is moving so fast? How do we stay relevant without constantly chasing? And how do we use AI as a power tool and not as a pressure cooker? So that's why I'm so happy to welcome Michael Hunter today. Michael is the creator of The Uncommon Hero and the author of The Resilient Tech Leader. He has spent decades in software and leadership, and I love how he describes his journey. He says he started by debugging code, then realized many technical problems were actually people problems. Now he helps leaders debug themselves with practical frameworks, deep humanity, and a touch of whimsy. Today, he will help us think about relevance, agency, and the human craft we need in this AI era. With that, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. And this topic is so relevant and so up for us, and we are so excited to hear from you. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Padma, for that lovely introduction. And I guarantee you today and always that AI will never replace you. It will, however, replace people who don't know what they're actually here to do. And yes, AI is taking job after job after job over very fast. And for many of us, this isn't so much exciting as threatening, anxious, like the ground is quietly shifting under our feet. What I have for you today isn't false reassurance. It's a way to move with that uncertainty and not be ruled by it. I see AI as a power tool. Whether it cuts off a limb or serves as an extra one, reduces you to the mediocre middle or amplifies your unique voice, holds you back or helps you move forward, depends on how you use it. And using it effectively isn't about knowing how to use it. It's about understanding where you are, why moving from there matters, and how to move with certainty, even if you're not so certain about your answers to those first two questions. Today, I have 3 tools for you can use to do exactly that. Individually, they're useful. Together, they form a simple navigation system for staying relevant, grounded, and effective, whether you use AI or not. I'm Michael Hunter, as Padma said, the Uncommon Hero, and I use this exact system with leaders every day. Leaders like Tamara. Tamara was the chief technology officer of her third startup. She was sharp, driven, deeply committed to her team. And yet, her days were swallowed by urgent, unimportant tasks. Administrative work and constant interruptions left her feeling drained. She couldn't focus on strategy. She could barely even breathe. Her team depended on her for everything, and she had no time for herself. Tamara didn't just feel busy. She felt overwhelmed, like a bottleneck, trapped by her calendar. Every decision waited on her. Every meeting pulled her in. She missed dinners. She missed sleep. And more than anything else, she missed feeling like herself. Along with all this missing was a quiet guilt, because she cared deeply and still felt like she was failing everyone, especially including herself. This system is how I help leaders like Tamara move from frustration, burnout, overwhelm, and despair to delight, energy, engagement, and joy. The 3 tools we'll get to in a moment are your Grody gap, your chain of meaning, and tiny experiments. That's what I'll cover today. First, though, before I show you how this works, I'd like you to know where it came from, because I didn't build this in a workshop. I built it from my own experience. The first leader I ever helped, and one I still help every day, is me. One thing I felt for a long time was shame. Not big, dramatic movie hero shame, but quiet, grinding self-doubt. For much of my life, I desperately wanted to be like everyone else, even though I knew I was almost entirely unlike everyone else. After all, I had built up a pretty long list of proof. I didn't fit neatly into academic boxes, or social ones, or even professional ones. No one else had their local librarian show up on the first day of school to give them a special award for reading 30 times more books that summer than anyone else. No one else got independent study in high school because the school didn't know what else to do with them. No one else, I have been assured, would dare play Brittany and Bach right after each other, let alone willingly admit to that. And no one else received a performance review that said, you'd be getting the best possible review this year if you hadn't just gotten the worst possible one last year. I'm going to go a little deeper here because this is where I first started using the system consciously that I'm introducing to you today. I had joined a new team building a brand new product, and the test manager told me, I'm only hiring very senior, super experienced testers. All of our developers have signed up to write lots and lots of tests, so we don't need all that basic stuff. I am only hiring people who approach testing in innovative ways. I said, great, this is what I do. And we started that way. And then pretty quickly, things were not so happy. It wasn't long, in fact, before we were being asked to write daily smoke tests. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, a smoke test is the most basic check there is. It literally comes from the days back when the first electronics were being built. And a smoke test was plug it in, see if smoke comes out. If it does, back to the drawing board. If not, then we can do more testing. This is not innovation. This is what every team has always done. And things got worse from there, to the point that at one point along the way, our test architect, whose entire job was developing testing strategy and innovation, what he was doing with his entire day was coordinating the daily bug bashes where everyone on the team, developer, tester, admins, would spend an hour and a half bashing on the product, trying to find all the places where it didn't work. This is kind of like hiring a world-class architect to inspect your bathroom for mold. This is one place where systems often break. Not because the person is wrong, or even that the system is wrong, but because the context changes. This is what I call now a grody gap. And here's some of the emotions that were showing up for me at this point. I was absolutely confused. I was 100% frustrated. And more than anything else, I was perplexed. I did not know how to do what I was there to do. A couple years in, my performance review said, if Michael doesn't turn this around, he is no longer an employee. My manager told me that that review had gone up and down 6 levels of leadership. He'd never seen one bounce around so many times, he told me. As you might imagine, I was kind of angry. Part of why that was that some of the feedback had clearly come from 6 months earlier, and no one had bothered to tell me then. When I asked my manager why he hadn't given me that feedback back when I could have done something about it, he paused, thought, and said, I see how that could have been useful. So now I wasn't even really angry anymore. I was really just lost. And this loss of clarity, I now recognize, often signals a growth gap. Everything I was great at was exactly what they said they wanted, and yet, somehow, was exactly now the problem. I was put on a performance plan. Every week, beginning of the week, we'd lay out exactly what I would do that week. And then, inevitably, at some point during the week, priorities would change. But, of course, the plan didn't. So I still had to do all the new things that came up, plus all the things that we said were important at the beginning of the week, even if they weren't anymore. At this point, my growth gap wasn't skill. It was misalignment between our stated goals and our actual needs. And then something super interesting happened. New projects showed up that no one else had time for, so they came to me. They turned out to require technical depth, exploration, experimentation, all the things I was good at. Even better for me, there were no hard deadlines because no one else knew how to do these things yet. So I did what I've always done. I picked something to do, I did it, I noticed what I learned, and I used that to decide what to do next. In other words, I was running tiny experiments, even though I didn't yet have that name for them. Several months down the road, I was asked to present my work to the team. I walked into that room expecting to see my manager and my peers, and they were there. And I also discovered, also present, were several layers of leadership above. Every one of these people asked deep technical questions, often that I had no idea was coming, and every one I answered easily. After that meeting, I was told, "You did a really good job." That meeting, I learned a little bit down the road, was actually a test going into my next performance review. And that's the review that said, if you hadn't just received the worst possible review last year, you'd be getting the best possible one this year. But the system didn't allow for that kind of swing. So, once again, I felt frustrated and, once again, completely perplexed. Because the only thing that had changed was they finally had screws, and I was no longer being judged for not being able to be a hammer. If you're wondering how I kept going through all that horribleness, how I navigated that mess, I did the only thing I knew how to do. Notice where I was, understand why moving from there mattered, and do one small experiment after another, which I realized is what I had done my entire life. Perhaps you are not so surprised now that I have spent a lot of my time utterly mystified by why people behave the way they do. Code, on the other hand, has always made much more sense to me. This is one reason that I've spent, as Padma said in the introduction, more than 35 years in software, doing nearly every role, including a lot of debugging code at the local bank that was gobbling up the other local banks and then got gobbled up itself, at Microsoft, Tableau, and Salesforce. At some point through all this debugging, I realized that all the really interesting, fun problems, the ones that I got the most kudos for, they were never actually technical problems. They were actually people problems. Squishy, uncomfortable people problems. So I started debugging people. Eventually, I realized this was inflicting help, not offering it. So I stopped trying to debug people, and now I help people debug themselves. which is what brings us here. Me taking everything I know about finding simple solutions to technical problems and applying that to finding simple solutions to squishy people problems, to your squishy people problems. And almost always, the simplest way to do this is to start with where you are. This often, for many people, brings relief because where you are is something that you don't have to earn or justify. It just is. The place I start every conversation in every coaching session is with some version of the same question. What brought you here? Sometimes I say it differently. What prompted you to take this time with me today? What's on your mind right now? What kept you up last night? The words don't matter. The intent does. I am trying to identify the gap you're experiencing right now. Because until we know that, we can't move past it. Early in my career, I took on the challenge of answering every question from the external developers who were trying to build applications on top of the product that I helped build. Invariably, these questions were in the form of, how do I do thing? I am trying to do thing and it isn't working. Your documentation says in order to do thing, I should do this. But when I do that, what actually happens is this other thing. As I dug into their problems, I invariably discovered the same thing. That thing they were asking how to do wasn't what they actually wanted to do. Once I understood their bigger challenge, almost always I could find another approach that was simpler, faster, more effective. People appreciated my help. When I helped them with those bigger challenges, though, that is when they sent glowing thank you emails to my manager, singing my praises. We can't always articulate our gap. And sometimes we don't want to admit what it is. One example I hear a lot sounds like, Martha said I should talk with you. This is never why they are talking with me. So I'll ask something like, well, Martha knows you're busy. I know she respects your time. What do you suppose Martha understands about what's going on for you that made her suggest this conversation? This works remarkably well in coaching, in sales conversations, in leadership, even at dinner parties. Because the more clearly we understand someone's gap, the more helpful we can actually be, including with ourselves. I call this your grody gap. Not because you are grody, or even that your gap is, but because things we avoid tends to make things feel worse than they are. Your grody gap tells you where you are, including what's preventing you from being where you want to be. And here's why this matters so much right now, specifically. AI is superb at solutions. You describe a problem, it gives you answers, fast, plausible, often impressive. But it doesn't have a way to ask whether you're describing the right problem. It takes what you say at face value and goes from there. And if you don't know your grody gap, AI cannot make you smarter. It can only help you be confidently wrong faster. Your grody gap is what you bring to that conversation that AI cannot. It's what makes everything after it, including working with that AI, actually useful. If this is leading you to maybe avoid your grody gap, know that we don't usually avoid it because it's intellectually hard. We avoid it because it doesn't feel so comfortable. It may even feel terrifying. Right now, take a moment and notice, with no fixing aloud, what might be your growth gap at the moment. Once you know where you are, the next question is why moving from there matters. For this, we channel our inner 3-year-old and ask one question over and over and over. What's important about that? We keep asking, gently, curiously, following that chain to the end, which is when we reach a point where nothing feels deeper or truer. That's the end of our chain. I call this your chain of meaning. Here's a real life example. Recently, I was talking with a head of engineering, and a gap he stated was helping people connect with their identity. What's important to you about doing that? I asked. That's something I can offer that I know will produce a good outcome, he replied. Okay, what's important to you about doing that? This is how I help my team create meaning. Great. What's important to you about doing that? The more meaning we have, the more I know we're not wasting our capacity, he replied. Okay, why do you want to be sure you're not wasting capacity? This is how I know that I am feeling fulfilled and the people on my team are as well. What's important to you about creating fulfillment? This is how we create something bigger together. Okay, what's important to you about that? Impact. All right, and what's important to you about having impact? This is how I help make the world a better place. At this point, I sensed a shift. I could tell this head of engineering had reached a point of clarity. And sure enough, this was the end of his chain of meaning. This clarity doesn't give us answers. It gives us reasons. We started with helping people connect with their identity and ended with having influence in making the world better. That's a little bit different than simply helping people connect with their identity. And something specific happened here. If this head of engineering had opened an AI tool and typed in the growth gap he recognized, I want to help people connect with their identity, he would have probably gotten genuinely useful answers. Frameworks, strategies, research on identity and belonging at work, pretty good stuff. He would not have gotten to making the world a better place. Not because AI isn't smart enough to get there, but because AI answers the questions you give it. It doesn't ask what's important about that. It doesn't walk with you, sit with you, while you feel your way towards something truer. It doesn't notice the shift in your voice when you finally land somewhere real. This is what a chain of meaning does. It doesn't give you answers. It gives you reasons. And those reasons have to come from inside you. No tool can surface them for you. If you stopped at that first answer, if that head of engineering has stopped at helping people connect with their identity, you and he would miss the real fuel. Notice if that's maybe true a little bit for you as well. When people reach the end of a chain of meaning, that shift they feel isn't intellectual, it's emotional. It can feel energetic, bright, exciting. When we reach these into the chains of meaning, what I often ask, as I asked this head of engineering, is how much of this did you know before we started? He replied, oh, I knew none of this. Thank you so much. Some people, though, tell me, oh, I knew all of it. This is when I get a little cheeky and say, why didn't you just give me that final answer then? As we dig into that question, oftentimes we find that while they may have intellectually known that final answer, they hadn't actually felt it yet. They hadn't embodied it. Your grody gap tells you where you are. Your chain of meaning tells you why moving from there matters. This is where humans still matter most. Large language models are getting really good at what and how. That why, though, the what's worth caring about, changing, preserving, that still comes from us. And I believe it always has to. I asked you a moment ago, what might be your grody gap? Now, take another moment to ponder, why does moving from there matter? Now we get to the part that people often rush. And it's a part that can feel even harder than naming your grody gap or building out your chain of meaning. And this is action. So let's not rush into action and instead take a moment to think of one thing that you're stuck on because it feels too anything, whatever. When we skip straight from a grody gap into action, skipping that meaning bit, burnout often results. Tiny experiments are how we can keep action safe and sustainable. Here, we don't start with grand plans, 5-year strategies, or perfect clarity. We can, in fact, start with something much simpler. Pick one small thing to do. Do it. Notice what you learn. And then pick another. This is much of what I did with Tamara, that CTO I mentioned back at the beginning. While the end result was dramatic, each of the individual steps we took to get her there was anything but. One of her big gaps was an inability to delegate. We didn't start by delegating anything. We started by taking one task on our plate and identifying everything holding her back from delegating it. Then we did the same for each of those, and then again for each of those, and again for each of those, and again for each of those, and so on until we reached items so small that she said, "Oh, I'd be happy to give that away. I know exactly who'd be perfect for it." And, ha, that doesn't even need to be done. These moments didn't come from Tamara's willpower. They came from shrinking her gap until it became workable. This is grody gap work. And this human data, how it actually feels to change a system, is unavailable to AI. And it's exactly the data that leaders need to make decisions. Here's what would have happened if Tamara had asked AI for help with her delegation problem. She would have gotten probably a solid answer. Something like, identify high impact, low risk tasks. Assess your team's capacity and development goals. Start with tasks that have clear success criteria. Build in feedback loops. All of that is correct. And none of it is what she needed. What Tamara needed was to discover, through doing, that the thing holding her back from delegating wasn't knowledge, wasn't strategy. It was a feeling, a belief that letting go meant something about her worth as a leader. This is not in any framework. It's not optimizable. It can only be found by moving. AI can design a perfect plan in milliseconds, but it cannot feel the resistance in your body when you try to execute it. It cannot tell you that the plan is right, but you're not ready. or that you're ready, but the plan is wrong. Only you can learn that. And the only way to learn it is to do something and notice what happens. This is what a tiny experiment actually is. Not a step in a process, a question you ask with your actions. I call these tiny experiments because experiments don't succeed or fail. They generate data. So you can never truly fail because you've always learned something. And if you think you didn't learn anything, you actually learned something super useful that you don't yet know what learning looks, feels, smells, tastes, sounds like for you, which is also pretty useful data. Even more than producing data, what experiments really do is reduce fear. They turn action from something risky into something safe. They turn pressure into curiosity. And that emotional shift from pressure to curiosity is the difference between performing and experimenting. I began today with a pretty strong claim. AI will never replace you. Here is why that's true. AI does not know your Gerta gap. It cannot build a chain of meaning. And while it can help you decide what to do from experiment to experiment, it can't tell you how you're going to feel as you do those. And it can't feel what happens as you do. Everything I've walked you through today, in fact, is what AI cannot do. Not because it isn't powerful, because it isn't you. So if AI does replace someone, it won't be because AI got better. It'll be because a human stopped doing the human bits, often because they didn't think those bits mattered. Here's what I want you to take away today. Notice your Gerta gap, build a chain of meaning, run a tiny experiment. Individually, these are helpful tools. Together, they form a navigation system for forward motion. Without fear, without pretending, without waiting to feel ready. If you remember nothing else today, remember this sequence. What I'd really like you to remember, though, is not this framework. It's that the world is clamoring to have you in it. This is one of my base beliefs, and this is the most deep reason why AI will never replace you. And it is often one of the hardest shifts I help leaders make. Once they make it, though, once they let this idea into their being, they often feel a sense of permission. Permission to stop contorting. Permission to trust themselves again. My system came from my work to do that for myself. It's a great place to start. If you find it doesn't fully work for you, great. Toss the parts that don't fit and build your own system. It works precisely because it is flexible enough to meet you where you are. However you do it, practice noticing where you are. Be curious about why moving from there matters. And perform one tiny experiment, do one small thing to learn more. As simple as this system is, you may find it a little less simple when you apply it to your particular situation. So if you do, no worries. Shoot me a note letting me know you came from here, and I'll give you a complimentary session. And you already know what we're going to do. We're going to start by identifying where you are and why moving from there is important to you. And even more, we're going to inquire into AI will never replace you as long as you keep doing the human bits. Thank you.
Wow. This was so good, such a deep conversation. I bet most of us are still really thinking so deep in what all you have mentioned. This is like I feel like a therapy session, go deep and then understand and then think what you're doing and what you need to do.
I hear that a lot from many of the people I work with. And I make it very clear I'm not a licensed anything. I often hear that working with me feels like therapy.
Yeah. So few things I just have few takeaways from this session that I want to share is we don't need to chase everything. We don't need to pretend we are overwhelmed. We just need to wait until we are completely ready. We can start exactly where we are and notice the gap and understand it matters. And take one tiny experiment at a time. And that's what I really love what you said. The world is clamoring to have you in it. So this is really deep. Anyone has anything to share?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to share that there are so many things in our lives and our professional settings that we don't even think of solving them this way. Like, I never had thought about, obviously, I didn't know about it, like the chain of meaning, which you, yeah. So, I mean, like breaking down a bigger problem or a situation and then trying to reach a place which is the real reason of why you want to do a certain thing was really nice. So yeah, my biggest takeaway was definitely the chain of meaning. Like if you start thinking about everything that you're doing has probably a purpose behind it, like probably it just brings you down to what kind of a personality are you in all. So yeah, that was really nice. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. And that is exactly the piece that so often gets left out. We come up with a question, we go straight to something to solve it, and we forget to do that in between step of why are we actually trying to solve this? What is the question actually we have to ask? Why does it even matter?
I loved your comment of, the thing that people ask you to do isn't really what they wanted to do, right? In terms of the gap. I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot as a leader, as a coach, as a consultant. And it's really, man, just getting to the nut of what is really going on is so essential. And building trust to get there is so essential. Because otherwise, without trust, they're not going to tell you.
Exactly.
So thank you for that.
And the trust that is often missing even more than between the person they're talking with and them is between them and themselves.
Exactly. Right. And for a lot of people, that's the essence of the problem. Right? Because if they trusted themselves and they trusted their own wisdom, they wouldn't need us.
That's right.
We call it the wisdom gap.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for this, Michael. I unfortunately need to run to a 9 o'clock, but I really appreciate the humanity that is behind this and the vulnerability that you put into it to share it with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. This was really helpful in seeing us through what we need to really think of, how deep we can go through while thinking about how to use AI and all that. Yeah. Nusra, you have any question? Feel free to unmute and ask. Yeah.
So I actually joined very late because, I had something else, but then I remembered. And I actually, I think I missed a very big session. And I can relate that because today I sat down today in the morning and because I'm also working with this AI in education, coaching, but how can I make it, more human? And how can I, give this, AI cannot replace us, because in education we always say AI will not replace teachers. And I actually like how as Padma said, I felt like a therapy session. Even I joined, I think it was only 15 minutes, and I could, God, I could align what I thought today. And yeah, I will rethink, and then I will, I have put on, a to-do action list today. So I will sit down again and rethink, and how can I slow down and pick tiny experiments, and, and get into action. So thank you very much. And I think, Padma, you will upload this in the YouTube, right? So,
yes, it will be uploaded onto the YouTube, and I'll share it on the LinkedIn.
Yeah. To say. Yeah. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the future activity.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah. Okay, I think we are on time. Thank you so much, Michael. This was really helpful. I'm going to share my reflection. There is a lot going on after I heard, and I have made my own notes. So after every session, I write down my thoughts through my Substack, and definitely this will be one of the interesting ones I want to share. We will be uploading our YouTube recording onto the YouTube and share it on the LinkedIn, and also we'll be making some video clips and share it on our Instagram and Facebook. So do follow us and make sure you join for our next conversation as well. With that, thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Padma, for having me here today.
Thank you. Have a great, wonderful day, everyone. See you. Bye.